Bye. All right. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Nicole, and I'm the campaigns coordinator at the Concordia Student Union. So I basically manage everything that has to do with campaigns. I do logistical planning for campaigns events and help connect students with resources for mobilizations that they're doing around various causes that affect students and their communities. So basically with some of the executives, because this campaign is a collaborative effort, as you will find out, we've prepared a short presentation to just introduce the campaign. So I'm gonna share my screen, and if anyone cannot see this, please just let me know. Just give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me know if anyone can't see this. There we go. So, like I was saying, this is just going to be a brief presentation discussing what the campaign is, what our goals are, what our demands are for this academic year. This year, as Akira was just saying, our campaign is on Black Lives Matter. And I'm here with some of the executives, and we're going to be sharing the speaking time during this presentation. So I will pass it off to Victoria.
So hello everyone, as some of you may or may not know, my name is Victoria Pesh. I'm the External Mobilization Coordinator at the Concordia Student Union. So I've been working with the campaigns department on this annual campaign alongside my colleagues that are going to present themselves as well. So I'll give the floor off to Manuela.
Hi everyone, my name is Manuela Simo. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator and I'm also the co-chair of the BIPOC Committee, and I'll pass it on to Sarah.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Majero. I'm also co-chair of the BIPOC Committee and also the Academic and Advocacy Coordinator for the CSU. I want to pass it off to Isaiah.
Hi everyone, my name is Isaiah Joyner and I'm the General Coordinator of the CSU.
First of all, I want to say thank you for all of you for coming today to our first BLM community consultation. It's a really pleasure for us to be hosting this event because it's a project that we've been working a lot during the summer. And this is something that you'll see going along within the conversation and the presentation. So I want to stress the fact that this is a collaboration between the campaigns department and the BIPOC committee of CSU. And we chose this campaign, Black Lives Matter, because we thought that this was time for us, for CSU, to really stand and support the Black community within Concordia. With all the events, the tragic event that happened during the pandemic, we felt like CSU needed to be a place where we could support and Black undergraduate students would feel more comfortable and seen as Concordia is a safe space for them to come and be free of their opinion and talk how they want to be able to. We decided to do these community consultation because we want to hear what you guys want to talk about. We want to know what are your difficulties, what are your challenges, and how we can help you as a student union.
So with that being said, what are some of our goals? There was the fist that was on top of the circle, just so you guys know it's not an empty circle, there are plans. So the first one is really education and raising awareness. So mandatory courses to raise awareness on the issue and producing educational material for students to allow them to be informed over the following situations. So the next thing that we're really looking on is raising awareness regarding police violence and really highlighting the fact that it is disproportionately affecting the Black and Indigenous communities. So that's another thing that's very important to address, which moves us to the next point of systemic racism. When it comes to systemic racism, there's obviously different levels that we need to address, and that's internally, so that means within the CSU, within Concordia, as well as externally, which means the Montreal area, and even larger than that, the country of itself, Canada. So how are we going to be doing that is really supporting community-led initiatives as well as student-led projects. When it comes to community-led activities, it's really BLM community initiatives that have been started and supporting them in any way that we can. One form was that is defunding the police coalition and so forth. And finally, uplifting the Black and Indigenous voices to showcase the projects they're starting, the projects that we obviously want to support moving forward.
All right, so here are some of the central demands that also the CSU was in agreement with what the Black students' demands were that were released over the summer. So our essential demands are aimed at eliminating Black systemic racism and discrimination at Concordia University and enforcing a pedagogy grounded in racial justice. So What we would like for our essential demands are essentially to see an increase of Black faculty and professors at the university, an increased BIPOC mental health resources on campus, such as having racialized psychologists, anti-racism and systemic discrimination workshops for all faculty and staff members, financial funding and resources dealing with scholarships, workshops, curriculum, and research centered around Black issues, and for Concordia University to address its ongoing racism and systemic discrimination within certain curriculum, and to have it aimed at educating as well as enforcing Black issues, as well as educating those who are our allies as well during this fight.
Isaiah, you're
muted. Yeah.
In a toxic relationship with the mute button. Okay, so shout out to the campaigns department, the BIPOC committee, and the executive team, because we've had a lot to do over the summer. So there's been a variety of different activities and engagements with the community as best we can while dealing with the pandemic and all that stuff. So over the summer, we've been supporting community events such as the BLM, such as can someone mute themselves?
Would it be possible to mute your mic, Elijah, please? I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce properly. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. All right, so we've been supporting community events, BLM demonstrations, and student-led projects centered around issues. There's been discussions with student leaders and existing groups that are working around and related to this issue on and off campus. We've approached Concordia about the EDI proposals that that started 2 years ago, and started having a discussion with the administration around student concerns and ways to improve consultations to get the community more involved and attack more of the systemic problems that racism performs that EDI can, equity, diversity, and inclusion can address. We've been producing research and production of materials for the campaign and orientation, infographic pamphlets. There's been production of campaign graphics as well. Our student life coordinator has been organizing the BLM orientation panels and getting different moderators to kind of address different systemic issues and educate students in the problems addressed. We've collaborated with Concordia to take part in the Concordia Shuffle to raise money for the Black Perspective Initiative and planning for events for fall and winter terms, respectively.
So with that being said, how did we get here to this community consultation town hall? So essentially when we began with the BLM becoming the annual campaign, the most important thing we wanted to ensure we did was make sure that it wasn't whitewashed. We wanted to ensure that we weren't implementing solutions that weren't necessarily addressing the problems. So that started off by having an internal conversation. Within that internal little town hall conversation that we had, we saw that this was something that can work and that we should be doing on a larger scale. So that led us to planning, organizing, selecting the events, finding a facilitator, which we are so thankful to have, as well as planning different workshops and finding a platform, all to mobilize students to be here today, to have this discussion and find different solutions and outcomes to the systemic racism and really figuring out what we want to do moving forward.
All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the campaign's event schedule for fall 2020. So these are just regular CSU events that occur pretty much every year for every annual campaign. Like we said, we want the actions and demands of this campaign to be community-led, so we want them to come out of the discussion that we have today and possibly future discussions. But there are events that we have annually. So our first event this fall is going to be the virtual 5 à 7 style campaign launch event, which will occur on October 9th. So details for that are going to come out within the next couple of days. You'll see them on our social media. There's going to be a Facebook event as well. So typically we have this, this is an event that we have in person usually. So we have usually like a wine and cheese kind of meet and greet type of thing. The goal is for students who are interested in the campaign to come and meet each other and discuss the campaign and find out how to get involved. So we wanted to find a way to do this virtually while still making it fun. So we're gonna have sort of virtual like trivia, like anti-racist trivia. There's going to be a bingo game. There's going to be like informal discussions and icebreaker activities. And there will even be a couple of little prizes. So if you're a student or a community member and you want to know how to get involved with our campaign, definitely join us for that event. It's going to be a lot of fun. Afterwards, we're going to have our community organizing workshop series. So for those of you who are not familiar with this workshop series, it's been happening every term for the past 2 or 3 years. Last year it was called Get Sustainable. Previously it was called Get Radical. And it's basically an introduction to community organizing for students who want to get involved with activism and like working with various movements and like getting involved in a group and where to start and whatnot. So this year we're having it themed around the annual campaign. So we're having it themed around supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and anti-racism. So this fall, it's going to be 8 workshops. They're going to be weekly and it begins on October 15th. So this is going to include topics like anti-oppression. So like just your basic anti-oppression training. There's going to be a virtual movie screening and discussion about the 9th floor protest at the Hall building. There's going to be a Know Your Rights workshop. So that's kind of a legal workshop for folks who want to attend a demonstration and don't know what their rights are, or who want to get involved in like different forms of activism and who want to know like what their legal standing is with regard to that and what their rights are. So we usually get a lawyer to come in and give that workshop. There's also cybersecurity for activists. And this year there's also going to be a workshop about uplifting the Black community. So this workshop series is mainly a skill share, but there's also some informational workshops that occur as well.
Like it's been said throughout this entire presentation, there's going to be a lot of different kind of events throughout the year, all centered around the same theme, our annual campaign, which is Black Lives Matter. And they will all be centralized around 3 different themes: mental health, community action building, and conquering racism. It's going to be happening during the fall and the winter semester. For those of you who might already know, we already kickstart the Black Speaker Series for the fall semester with Sandy Hudson, the founder of Black Lives Matter, and she was part of the orientation panel. For the rest of the fall semester, we have Rodney John, which is one of the participants of the riot on the 9th floor at Concordia. And we'll also have Anthony Morgan, he is a human rights and civil liberty lawyer, and he's going to talk more about the community action building aspect of the series. During the winter semester, we're really more focused on the mental health aspect of it. So we'll talk about how you can uplift the Black community, your resources on campus in Montreal, and really we'll try to make it really a safe space for Black undergraduate students to come and talk about what they're experiencing at home, whether it's related to school or just stress in general. So we're really looking forward to this speaker series that's going to be happening throughout the year, and we're really hoping to see all of you there.
So that pretty much concludes the little context presentation that we wanted to give you. We will definitely take any questions that you have about this presentation specifically, but otherwise we can pretty much get into the discussion at this point. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, thank you guys for doing and putting that presentation together. Yeah, I'm not sure if I should leave a little room for anyone if they have questions regarding the presentation. If not, then I guess we can get right into it. But before that, I was just wondering, Isaiah, if you'd be interested in clarifying what exactly EDI is, like I know it stands for equity, diversity, inclusion, but what exactly is like increasing EDI on campus?
So we actually have the chair of the EDI committee here with us, Lisa Ostigi. So before I go, if you would want to give your vision, and then I can go over what we spoke about and where we're going.
Great.
I remembered to hit my mute. I say I've got that problem as well. I'm Lisa Ostigi. I'm the special advisor to the Provo on Campus Life, and I've been working with 2 groups, an advisory group and a working group on EDI. And EDI, in my view, is really a broad equity, a broad commitment and a broad look at supporting our underrepresented members of our community. It's really about our work with the working committee has really been about looking very broadly across the university on what we can do to support our underrepresented groups, and it falls into different categories. I don't know whether that explains it well enough.
So to add on that is that after the process was started, it was not a deadline, but there was a date for originally to give feedback on the process, on the consultation, because the committee and the working group came up with recommendations on how to encourage equity, diversity, and inclusion on campus. And so upon reviewing all the recommendations, we thought that there was still stuff that could be added, and that in order to do that, we would need to, because certain student groups were not involved in the process and others weren't able to come for a variety of reasons. And so there's no specific time limit to add these recommendations. So we are now going to make sure that the groups afflicted by these things and kind of hopefully broaden the scope a little bit to include stuff like systemic discrimination, because when we have systemic discrimination, racism, and all these deep interrelated issues, equity, diversity, and inclusion can be seen as the solution. So when those recommendations don't include those type of problems, then it kind of like almost defeats the purpose. And right. So we had a conversation with the admin about that. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, we're going to try to make sure that we can get those recommendations and any work done in the future to tie into all the work we do here in the conversations we have here.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, do you want to shed a little bit of light on some of the recommendations that have been brought up based off of the work that has been done previously about EDI on campus to start this conversation?
I can start the conversation. I think today's more about the campaign and what is this group wants to achieve, but I can talk a little bit about generally the working group is really has been consulting with the community and looking at how we can develop a shared responsibility around EDI, how every unit in the university, all of our unions, all of our departments, all of our service units can really think about what would be some pillars around which every unit could be working on plans to improve our outreach and our support to underrepresented groups on campus. And so essentially our recommendations, there's a lot of them, there's 115, but they fall into 3 areas. The first one is a whole bunch of recommendations about retaining and recruiting a diverse community. The second set of recommendations is about fostering an inclusive campus culture. And the third set of recommendations are around supporting innovative and inclusive teaching, learning, and research.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for that, Lisa. Thank you for clarification. I knew what EDI stood for, but I wasn't sure if anybody else did. So I just wanted to have that clarified. I also still think it's a very important part of this conversation to see what the admin is doing about this, because the student union works very close in partnership with the administration, and the administration has a lot of power in terms of the outcome of how Black Lives Matters are treated, how Black lives are treated on campus. So thank you for that. So in terms of starting this conversation, the goal tonight is really anything that we can think of that the CSU should be demanding or focusing on. So I took some notes about some of the things that were said during the presentation, and a few things, major things that came out were the educational aspect in terms of curriculum, how profs are coming off, how they're treating their students, how students are feeling in terms of the atmosphere around when they're getting their education. I'm pretty sure we wanted to have a stance on police violence. systemic racism. But I was just suggesting that we start off with education. In terms of increasing Black faculty members, that was a really interesting point. I hear that a lot, and I feel like I've been at Concordia, this is my 4th year, and I've been hearing we want increased Black faculty members since my 1st year, but I have never really heard much of an improvement on that front. And I'm just wondering if it's because we haven't really addressed how we plan to increase Black faculty members, and what exactly do we need from our non-Black faculty members in order to reach this goal of having an increased Black faculty member presence on campus. So I just wanted to open up the floor for that type of conversation.
Sorry, Kira, just to ask, do we use the hand up function just if we ever like to participate?
Oh, yes, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure
Okay.
your update on your Zoom, but if you don't have it, you can also just private message me and I will start a queue on who wants to speak.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
It's not like a specific question, but it's just in terms of starting the conversation about how we're going to address the situation when it comes to faculty members. There's a lot of conversation about we want an increased Black faculty member presence on campus. We can't really be talking about addressing, Black issues on campus if we don't really have enough profs representing Black students. And so I'm just wondering if the solution in terms of like how are we going to increase Black faculty members on campus, has that really been discussed? I feel like we always are saying that's what we want, that's what we need, but not necessarily how we're going to go about that. And a big thing when it comes to discussing marginalized issues, one thing that comes up a lot is giving space and asking of those in power to give space to those who are not in power in order to, alleviate the imbalance. So I'm just wondering, how do we go forward with this goal of like increasing Black faculty members? Yeah.
Okay, so I see Sarah's hand is up. She was up before mine in terms of like, so would you like to go first, Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, I can't see the hand. So
you have to click you have to click the participants button, and then you'll see people's hands raised and next to.
You're right. Perfect. All right. Thank you. Okay, yeah, sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Well, I know some of the admin are with us here today, so it'd be also good to like hear from you guys, but I'm mainly just going to speak from like not academic and advocacy, but more of just like a Black student in general. I think like it would be really great to have like, I guess these discussions just with the admin for how like we can actually start like the process, and even doing that and helping have like, Black professors there. And I do know at some points it is challenging also to find different types of faculty members, but it would be good to, I guess, kind of start like with that initial process and see if like even the other marginalized profs that we do have, if they even have like colleagues and whatnot who would be also willing to come to Concordia, I guess, to teach certain classes. Because I will say, for instance, as like a personal experience, I've been in poli-sci since 2018, I guess. I was in a psychology major before that, and really within the psychology department, I personally wasn't really able to see certain people who were also marginalized, who may have taken like a same path as myself, who I could really lean on in that sense for mentorship for a program, especially in psychology, and more so also in, now I see in political science as well. Really like, as I was a president of the Political Science Student Association, it was so hard to even find, I guess, political representatives who, in that sense, were Black or maybe lawyers. It took a lot more digging to find, and I think that's something that we really do lack in that sense. And like at times in our community, we feel lost, and like, who can we rely on for these certain issues? Who are in the same fields as us? Who we can speak to about their path? And like, how can we get there as also being a marginalized person? And in that aspect too, like I only had my first Black prof last winter semester of 2020 for an African politics class. And to me, that was the most enlightening experience I've had, learning about African politics from an African professor, being able to shed light on these issues that are going on in Africa and provide that really good experience that I haven't gotten through my degree in political science. And especially being in political science, I think it's really important to have these diverse backgrounds available to teach us about the different perspectives, even for our allies who may be white or of different race, to really know what we're going through and to also explain that, and also how they can help us with that journey in specific of like being a Black student in that sense. But really, I think it would be great to like just start having these conversations about how we can increase in that sense, like that having more Black profs at Concordia, and how we can really extend that too. And even in that sense, having like, even if it's like a Black directions to like just help guide things, or similar to the Indigenous directions that we do have for how we can, you know, just start, I guess in that sense, feeling comfortable within our own academic environment and being able to experience these situations. Because even I'll say like during my classes, I've also, in the sense of like, when, you know, with Quebecois culture and whatnot, and explaining certain things about race and Black people, I've had some profs even use the N-word in class, and having that feel very disheartening. And then a bunch of other, let's say, white students are just looking at you to see what your reaction is, and you don't know, I guess, how to react in that sense of the academic setting, because you have to think about, if I say something, are my grades gonna like maybe be penalized? So in that sense, it's really, I guess, trying to make like more of that open environment, really by having more people of color, even when we talk about Indigenous issues too, because I'm also in the first People Studies department as well, and having grown up in Nunavut in that environment also, like just being able to also, I know we have a few Indigenous profs at the school, but to also increase that as well within the first People Studies department. And really, it's about also teaching these profs, although we may not have Black or Indigenous profs, but these profs who teach our classes, to also be able to have that sensitivity towards us in these types of environments in academia, and to really take that into consideration when teaching us, because some of these things we may be reliving due to experiences. So really in that aspect. And sorry, I talked a long time, so I'm done.
This is what this is for, right? Absolutely. Thank you for that.
No worries.
Go ahead.
I think it was like Isaiah and then Anne.
Yeah,
the Black perspective.
Anne and then, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
What's it called? Yeah, so it's like completely echo what the sentiments that Sarah says, but no. Furthermore, in that in that direction where I'm like, I feel like coming into university, I guess context, I'm from a neighborhood called Little Burgundy, and it's like just to stress the importance of having people who look like and relate to you, something that a lot of people take for granted, where I'm like, the option, a lot of people from underprivileged backgrounds, university is not an option. It's like they look at you as if you're doing this amazing thing where you're coming in to further your self-education, that you're getting good grades. And like, I like what I see at Concordia is like, we do have a diverse population of students, but then like coming from, let's say, the faculty of business, where a lot of our profs aren't necessarily teachers, they're professionals. So it's like you get, it reminds me of the recent anecdote that I've seen from Wells Fargo. I think the CEO claimed that the reason why the company had no black talent, like not enough black talent, was because they claimed that there was a limited pool of talent to pick from when it comes to the Black community. And so I'm like, it's one thing where you have academia or whatnot, so there's systemic problems that there are limited Black people in certain fields with that maybe doctorates or whatnot. But then when you look even at a professional level where there's so many Black professionals in different places, so the fact that whatever the process is now, that through the professional channels that they're not ending up teaching us, where it's like there's a lot of Black students at Concordia, but by not showing it in the teaching span, which is like one of the most important things of a university, why we come here for learning, it kind of like, it's like a subtle nudge of showing that like, well, you can come here, but you can never like truly be here, because teachers are supposed to be here for like tenure, like you want to build your career here and be a part of the university. And so it's like, it's, I guess, a process where I guess the other side of that spectrum of the limited pool, where the pool is not limited. So if you don't have it here, then the first thing is just doing everything in your power to make it here. I know there could be, people don't like the idea of quotas, or people don't like the ideas of affirmative action, but when you don't have it, you need to worry about getting it. And then once you get it, you have to maintain it and put in those counter systemic processes to ensure that there's always people there representing these people, so that we don't have to, like, every Black student shouldn't be the voice of their community in the university. It should just be a natural thing that we come to university and be able to just come through the process, see ourselves in every which way, because there's a lot you can do, whether it is studying university, whether it is working for the university, whether it is interacting with the university. There's so many different things, but it just seems like it's this unattainable or this amazing thing that the Black community just cannot like get, type of thing, from my experience.
Absolutely. I really like I'm saying it's a quote now because it came from your mouth, but you can come here, but you can never be here. Like, that really resonated with me. I feel like it's relatively easy to access university, but the numbers drop exponentially in terms of like how many Black students actually graduate from university and who actually get to the end of it. And I feel like what you're saying really resonates with like that fact. But I have more things to say about it, but I'll bring it into a question after everyone else speaks. So Anne, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. I came to this saying I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to listen, because we want to hear what students are saying. So for those of you who don't know, I'm the interim provost and vice president academic, and there are a couple of deans on the call, and in terms of, I think I don't want to speak for them, but from other conversations that I've had, we are all committed to increasing the number of Black faculty, because it's critical. It's critical for us to have a diversity of voices, to be able to teach all of our students a diversity of perspectives. And I don't use the diversity in the sort of like, we need a couple of sprinkles throughout. You really do need to have a rich base of perspectives to be able to really affect change. So for me, it's very important for us to have Black faculty, but not just in, how can I put this? Not just in Black subject matter courses. So, Sarah, I agree with everything that Sarah and Isaiah, both of you have said, and I fully agree with them. I don't want there only to be Black professors teaching African history. I want there to be Black professors teaching, Canadian constitutional history, or teaching Canadian art history, which is my discipline, or teaching, building engineering, because that's how you're going to bring students in. Students need to see themselves in the front of the classroom so that they realize that they are capable of this. And so the challenge, and it's not a challenge, but what we have to do as administrators is to put processes in place to train hiring committees, or selection committees for faculty, to recognize that you're not looking for another version of yourself, which tends to be the way hiring committees work. And this is the case in all industries. most people, and I'll speak from my own experience, not my own experience, but I'm a woman. And that's been the issue for women for decades, that, to access the vice president position, it's easier to do it if you're a man than it is to be a woman, because it's like people hiring a version of themselves. So the first step is to realize, no, actually, you don't want to hire a version of yourself. You want to hire somebody that's going to challenge you, that's going to be different, that is going to actually strengthen what you're able to deliver because of the diversity, because of the different perspectives. So for me, that is key. So what we've been doing for the last several years is to have training around systemic bias, around assumptions, around something called fit, in the way that we hire faculty members, in the way that we hire administrators, in the way that we hire, increasingly, I'm hoping we'll be able to do it with staff as well, so that hiring committees recognize that they're hiring somebody that they're comfortable with because they're like them, rather than hiring somebody for the skills and the knowledge and the experience that they're bringing. So for me, that's key. So we're about to, so every year we go through a call to departments to propose new tenure track hires. It's a proposal that goes through the faculties, and so departments make suggestions to the deans make recommendations to the provost decides based on the recommendations and based on frankly the finances that we currently have. So how many professors are we able to hire? So this year it was 12. And of those 12, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, at least 3, if not 4, are in disciplines or are in positions that should naturally result in a Black professor or a professor of color being hired, because it's either a position in history, in Black Atlantic history, it's a position in art history and art education, around Black culture, it's a position in journalism around decolonization. So those kinds of positions should result in a non-white faculty member. But what I want to see is the position, I'll bring up building engineering because it's there. I would like to see a Black professor in building engineering, because that's important to me, that this be what we're striving towards. In terms of how we can do this is really through education of hiring committees. Unfortunately, in Quebec, we cannot advertise for particular constituencies to apply for positions. So we can't say we are looking for an Indigenous scholar, or we are looking for a Black person to, apply for these positions, because the labor code does not allow us to do that. But there are ways that we can frame the position, and most importantly for me is there are ways that we can train our hiring committees to do that. And that is something that I am absolutely committed to, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to actually do what I fundamentally believe needs to happen, which is make our university reflective of our society. I mean, we keep talking of ourselves as a next generation university. So that means we've got a range of people on our faculty, on our staff, and as students. Our research looks different, and how we do things looks different. So the more different voices we have at the table, the better we're going to be able to achieve that.
Absolutely.
I'll stop talking now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. Important words. Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking of actually the code for Quebec and labor law and not being allowed to specify what you're looking for, and how aggravating that is. But it's definitely something that we're capable of working around. And like you said, like ignoring that factor, we should focus on the people that are on these hiring committees and training them to have a perspective that allows them to hire diverse profs.
Maybe I just add one little thing is that it's also where you advertise. So if you're just asking for, if you're just going to the regular places to get people to apply for jobs, and that's across the spectrum, then you're only you're gonna replicate yourself. So it's really about thinking creatively and broadly about your networks, about reaching out and advertising those positions in other places.
Absolutely. I'm gonna pass the mic to the Black Perspective Initiative, but just before, I'm just gonna plant the seed here about the hiring committee, because that's the first question that came up to me. You're talking about, training the people that are on these hiring committee to have these perspectives that allow for them to hire people that come from diverse backgrounds. And I'm just wondering that if there's also another way to make sure that these hiring committees are composed of people of diverse backgrounds, because usually that's, how you nip that in the butt. If you come from a diverse background, it's easier for you to understand that it's useful to hire more people from diverse backgrounds, and it's going to enrich the education moving forward. But just something to think on. Yes, Black Perspective Initiative, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick, the founding coordinator for the Black and Perspectives Initiatives. I'm going to speak a little bit about the hiring and faculty in kind of a sideline way, and then talk about a little of the ways in which I feel like, first of all, I'm just really impressed by all the work that you have done. It's amazing. I'm always impressed by what the CSU comes forward with. You're such an amazing team, devoted students who really just bring your 150% all the time. And so I just want to take a moment to thank you for that, and to tell you that I'm also really excited to be able to collaborate with you in the future as well as in the past. It's been really great working with you all. One of the ways that I wanted to mention that is a possibility for students to get even more involved with what hiring will look like at Concordia in the coming future is to participate in what is called right now the Black Concordia Caucus. And so they're looking to increase their membership. This is open to all Black community at Concordia, so that includes faculty, staff, students, even alumni. So I will put all the information in the comment afterwards, but it's a really great way to get a real sense of what is happening right now in terms of BLM around Concordia, and making sure that your voices are really heard in, one of the great things about being as a student is that you guys are really everywhere, all the faculties, all the departments. So you really know firsthand what's lacking, what needs to be addressed. So I really encourage you all who are interested to participate in that. And then I did want to, because I don't want to have to speak at another point later again and take space from anyone else, is that, so there was, on your demands, you mentioned BIPOC mental health resources. And I just wanted to let you all know, also partly because you contributed immensely to that. So the Concordia Shuffle fundraising went really amazing in terms of the Black Perspectives project for Black mental wellness on campus. We raised $20,620. So that's really, really unheard of. It's the best the Shuffle has never raised that much for one team. So that's really exciting. Very, very happy that happened. And I will definitely keep you all posted with the progress. And I want to have as many of you as possible in the process and finding ways to make sure that this is exactly what you need. So I'll also leave my email so people can participate. And then there was questions about funding, and I just wanted to let you all know that also because of all of your student activism and the way that you make your demands known to the university, the Black Perspective Initiative, which was initially part of the Faculty of Arts and Science, is now at the Office of the Provost. We're the Black Perspective Office, and so that's exciting. We have much more funding to make available to you. There will be just so much going on this year, so it's very exciting. And there will be work around anti-racism trainings and workshops. And I would really love to work with the CSU to not only promote that and make sure that we have good attendance, and I would love to promote your events as well, but also to work in consultation with you in terms of what are the needs, how do we speak to the students, and not just the Black students, but also, our wide range of, cultural backgrounds, international, local, et cetera, making sure that we're really touching the spectrum that we have. So that's all I wanted to say.
Amazing. Thank you. That sounds amazing. I didn't actually know the Black Perspective Initiatives existed, which is wild. So I'm so glad to have you here.
We were very new, just so you know. So it's not because you were like living under a rock. It started in November, and then Corona happened, and then all of a sudden we were in office. So
okay. Totally get that. All right, great. I'm really glad. Thank you for presenting yourself. I really do hope that a lot of collaboration does come out of this. So next we have Manuela.
Yeah. I'm just so happy. I kind of lost my train of thought because I was going to mention the Black Caucus and how it's really a place for all the Black undergraduate students, but also the Black faculty member to come and just really all brainstorm all these issues that we all concerned about, and including the Aryan Committee. And it's just, I don't know what to say because it's a project of mine. Like, I'm going to talk about personal experience, but as a Black student at Concordia, having more representation within the CSU and just being seen in the Concordia as a person like of color and that I belong there was something on my mind for a long year. And the fact that we came to this team, all of us together in the CSU, and finally made the Black Lives Matter our actual annual campaign, for me is an achievement in itself, because as a Black student at Concordia, and I've lived in Montreal my entire life, when I first came, I didn't really feel like I belong. I'm going to say that in quote. Why? Because like Sarah and Isaiah said, there's not a lot of representation when it comes to Black students. And it's an issue because yes, we have all these great associations that throw events and have these mentorship programs and all these great opportunities. But when it comes to actual classrooms, it's really hard for us to visualize ourselves and see how we can continue a university experience. And I'm saying that because, like everybody else said before me, if you don't see someone like you, it's really hard. It's harder for you to continue doing what you're doing, and also to even imagine yourself in the future and whichever profession you want to do. So that makes me very happy, all the conversation that we're having right now about how we're all seem to be on the same page. And I really want to stress the fact that I've been in contact with the BPIs since the start, and they're really a great group. So I really suggest that all of us today, guys, just go and maybe try to either follow the page or really stay in contact with them, because they have great projects. The Black Caucus is going to come as meeting very, I think it's at least once a month. And it's a really great safe space for you to talk about your issues. And we all brainstorm on ideas and solution to them, including all the issues of Aryan Committee, how the campus can be more secure, how we can look for the history of the funding of Concordia and the Black history behind it, because it's something very important. We're all talking about how we want to have a Black teacher that's teaching the African study program, but if we don't understand the Black history of Concordia itself, how can we even hope to achieve this dream? That shouldn't be a dream technically, but we should all work on this together. And that's really what I want to say. But I really want to say that I'm super happy for BPI right now.
Amazing. Thank you, Manuela, for that. I'm just going to also ask if Anik, that's your name, right? Yes. Awesome. If you could just, if you're willing to copy your information onto the Facebook page, just in case that there are people who aren't able to attend or don't see this in the messages when they come on, I think that'd be very useful, because I feel like there's a lot of people like myself who don't really know that there's this resource out there, and it's an amazing one. But yeah, okay, Isaiah?
Yeah, what's it called? I completely agree and echo what Manuela said before, and to kind of feed off of what I was saying before and what Manuela just said, it's like back into like that impossible dream. And it's important for our communities that we do see ourselves in the university, but something that's just as important is to teach others, like teach people how to treat you and show people, like when you don't have those people in those positions, it kind of like, and we find ourselves in situations where people don't really relate with our pain, with our struggle. They feel confused, they can't relate. It's because they're conditioned not to respect us, to underestimate us, to think that we're speaking white, or that attending university is a white thing, having proper grammar is a white thing, like all these different things. So at least showing them that, like, oh, well, I have Black profs and put these different faculties in context, it will be kind of like that subliminal to be like, this is natural, this is normal. Black people belong in our society and they can do anything that we can do. And like, we're all at the end of the day human beings. But right now it's like people objectify, people underestimate, people put us down, say, like, they say things without thinking, they don't think twice, it's a whole mess. And something that looking back at my degree, it's like there's just so many different things that have been normalized. You just take it for granted. You're just like, keep it pushing, we're gonna make it someday, it's gonna be fixed. And when the world stops and like you're left with clinging on to like some type of structure, whether it is your computer, your work, your life, but then you're seeing like racism, discrimination, police brutality, all these issues rampantly. And then you see people who are just not getting it. It boggles the mind, and it can turn the average person to insane. So it's like, unfortunately, like, what's it called? It's taken so much. Sorry, see that toxic relationship with the mute button? What's it called? Unfortunately, these issues could have been solved in my grandma's generation. They could have been solved in my mom's generation, and now they're in mine. But it's just that now that we're in this generation, hopefully by time that we're all ready to be married and have kids, student-wise, this will be resolved. And this is just the first of many steps where it's like, we're past that point of trying to convince people that it's a good idea or this is the way to go, but because these are the actions that should have happened before we came to university, so that we could be talking about, just like, we shouldn't be advocating that, like, the Black Lives Matter campaign shouldn't exist, because it should be obvious that we matter. Like, we shouldn't be at that like basic level of like teaching you like, I matter, we matter type of thing as a community. It should be like, okay, like, how are we gonna beat McGill? Like, because that should be our only problem, be like, we're gonna be a better university than McGill. But we have to put like those trivial issues on the side for now and focus on uplift. Like, it's sad, but I'm like, and it's petty, but I'm like, these are just, for me, I see them as simple issues because they're simple, because they're easy to identify. And there's a whole list of plethoras of solutions that we can, but it's about the people who are in those seats to make sure that they're receptive and they do the necessary steps so that we can get over those issues and we can focus on the more trivial. But yeah, I'm talking a lot, so I'm gonna just stop now.
So very valid points. And I actually want to speak to something because it has come up quite a bit in terms of what you've said, Isaiah, in your previous comment as well. And same with Manuela, and in terms of like, you know, increasing the representation in every general field has nothing to do with just like, you know, Black history or like the African American history or African Canadian Atlantic trade, like just having Black profs in engineering or in any terms of any class of political science. And I think that kind of goes down to the point of, you know, at the end of the day, Black people are just people, and you know, the Black term should be put aside. And I feel like increasing representation of Black professors in whatever domain in university is going to help in terminating the whole stereotype of, you know, Black people can only be a certain way. Isaiah, you were saying, you know, you go to university and then people are saying that you're speaking white, but, you know, university space is just for education, has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with ethnicity. So you're going there to get an education. You're going to leave there with an education. It's not white education, it's just education. And increasing representation on campus is going to do a lot for really changing that mindset that people have about Blacks can only do a certain thing and you only see Black professors in certain domains. And I just wanted to talk to that point. And also something that you've said has brought me to my next point in this conversation, but I'm just going to let Carter have a say in what we've been talking about up to date. So Carter, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. I guess I put my hand up in a response to what Anne Whitelaw was saying. And I think you also actually had responded to that with the question I had about just like for the hiring committee, having Black people on the hiring committee itself would guarantee that kind of ability to hire more Black people and more people of color. And so I had a question for Anne, I guess. Are there any people of color or non-white people on the hiring committee currently? I don't know the hiring committee. So that was a question that came up. And I know like having positions or like, I forgot exactly what the point was about, but like having certain classes available so that they will most likely be filled with like a Black professor. Just like questions that are relevant to like race and stuff like that. But I'm a student at Concordia and my 4th year was last year, and I was in an art history class that was specifically focused on race and art history and Canadian, like Black artists in Canada, that history. And it was taught by a white woman, and she was very nice, but it was a white woman. And that seems like one of those classes that Anne was speaking about that would like almost oblige the university to hire a person of color when it's talking about Black artists in Canadian art history. So I just wanted to put that out there, that even though that class seems like it would make for a non-white person to be teaching it, it was a white woman. Yeah, that was just my point. Yeah, so my question is like, are there any Black people or people of color on the hiring committee currently? Thank you.
Thank you, Carter.
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you know that's one of the challenges of not having a lot of faculty of color at universities, is that it's not always possible to have a Black person, a Black faculty member or an Indigenous faculty member on hiring committees. So that's for me why it's really important to do that training, to make sure that there is an ability to recognize the importance of a more diverse hiring. And I think the other challenge, you know, I'd let others speak to this, but the other challenge in terms of ensuring representation is that and this is the vicious circle, is that it puts an undue burden on Indigenous, Black, and faculty of color to sit on committees because you want the representation. So that means that you've got a faculty member, so let's just say tenure track faculty member doesn't have tenure yet, and is working towards getting tenure by focusing on their research, focusing on being the best teacher that they can be. But then they're also pulled into all these committees because we need to have representation. Not that we need to have, but we think that we need to have that kind of representation and want to have that representation. So they're not able, it's an unequal field. And so it's those kinds of inequities that we need to address, one, by increasing the diversity of the pool of the number of faculty members that we have, but also by giving white faculty members the tools to be able to voice those concerns. And so that it's not only Black faculty members are saying, we need to hire Black faculty.
Could I ask why? I don't understand the difficulty of having non-white people on the hiring committee? Like, there's no, what is prohibiting that besides, like, why does that need to be talked about? Why do people need training for there to be people
No,
hired?
what I'm saying is that there are not, most departments do not have non-white faculty members.
But there are non-white faculty members.
Right.
And
Oh, sorry. That was an inside baseball comment on my part. Faculty. So departments, department hiring committees are composed of department members.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
But yeah.
All right. Do you feel like that's clarified for you, Carter? Brian?
Mostly.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully more clarifications will come with more conversation. If not, like, obviously don't be shy to ask more questions. So just kind of building off of like what you have said here, Anne, and some of the comments that Isaiah had made earlier. I'm just gonna go back to like what I had said earlier in terms of like stereotype and Blacks being very restricted into what they can, what they can't do. And also, you know, these stereotypes, they hurt Black people, but they are also just deeply, deeply ingrained in everybody in general, right? So how do we combat this? And you're talking about training these faculty members that are sitting on these hiring committees, but in terms of university, there's not only professors, there's also students. And how are we changing the mentality on campus around systemic racism, which is very silent, and I think is one of the reasons why it's really hard to get the everyday student to understand what's systematically wrong with the institution and the educational system, and how it is inherently racist, and how it does create a lot of barriers for Black students. And I was just thinking about things like, you know, for example, last year it was reinforced that everyone had to take a mandatory consent training, right? There was a lot of talk around sexual violence on campus and the importance of training everybody and getting everybody on the same page. And so I'm wondering if something like that is possible in terms of the discussion around anti-racism. Is it possible to implement bad title, but you know, a Black 101 class that's mandatory as a general education requirement for all students, and not necessarily a class that's focused on like anti-racism, but like a class that's focused on anti-racism within the scope of what the student is studying. So let's say like the student is in engineering, like can there be you know, an anti-racism and engineering 101 class for all incoming students, and the same thing in psychology, because, you know, racism and systematic racism shows up in very different ways in very different departments for different people. So that's just a suggestion, but it's really just to start the conversation on solutions in terms of changing this mindset of faculty, but also students on campus. Yeah. I see Victoria, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so it's funny that you bring that up, or that you say that, because that was one of the first recommendations that the CSU really had, and that was something that we really thought was like the biggest push. After we saw the sexual violence became mandatory for every single person to take, our first thought was, okay, so that means we can make anything mandatory. So how would that go about, and how would we do that, and all of that I think are just logistics. But I love the fact that you're talking about really focusing in on the industry that you're in, because the reality is that that's where you're going to be going when you're done in the real world. And yes, you need to understand the basics, but you need to understand just a bit more so you can go into your industry and be that less biased. Have that one thing, like, I guess, that education one more level higher, rather than starting at the ground of zero and having to learn. And by learning in the workforce or learning in the workspace, you're going to be hurting other people. So it's better to have that education here and have that education while you're in your university degree. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I think that's one of the first, and I don't want to say most important solutions, but I think it's one that will be really good to keep in the long run with Concordia students, and it'll really differentiate us from the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah?
Yeah, just to reiterate what both of you were saying, I think it's really important to have these types of trainings, especially to just, in that sense, really to the BIPOC community as well, to address some of these issues specifically with how we are treated and how how to make that classroom environment more welcoming, but also like to extend it to our student population as well, which is one thing that would be really important too, like through the aspect of, like we said, through my Concordia, on how they have that, the online digital questionnaire thing that we did, not questionnaire, but sorry, PowerPoint presentation, really outlining that, kind of illustrating what these terms are and why we're learning them and why it's applicable to even our university education. Because like, I'll even say, like, sometimes it really also depends on some faculties too. Some seem to be, I don't want to put this judgment on everybody, but some faculties seem to be more open when it comes to race than others. I don't want to target engineering, but like, that's just like an example that I've just seen in that aspect, just personally, especially from how even our quote unquote councils of representatives even run as students. You can kind of see like this common trend. So even that, instilling it within our curriculum, I think is also going to be important, because from time to time we just see ourselves reiterating what the issues are, and it just being as if it's like a wall we're talking to all the time. And I think it's really important that we have these discussions, or even for these instances, I'll even have like a student said to me, well, you were born in Canada, aren't you kind of Canadian? Aren't you Canadian? Yes, I am Canadian, but also you can see my skin color, like I'm Black also. So those are kind of like, you know, just the things, like people are very oblivious, I would also say, to like, you know, the Canadian context, and people think that racism doesn't happen in Canada, and Canada's multicultural, and Canada is all this glory that, you know, we are in comparison to our neighbor down south. Like, yes, some things are a lot better, as you probably saw in the debate last night, but you know, it's just in the Canadian context, people don't understand what we go through, and they think that Canada is just like, you know, we have our constitution, we have our charter, everything's diverse, people are protected, but really people don't understand those concrete, you know, values that we also, like what we go through. There are Black Nova Scotians, there were Black slaves. You know, Canada has its own history that's not acknowledged and that's not thought about, even when it comes to Indigenous people, as well, as you saw on the news with Joyce, with what happened in Quebec, you know? And it's just those little things that people don't understand, and they think because you're here, oh, it's okay, like, you know, it doesn't matter. But you know, it does matter in society. And I think, I mean, it is like a really big global issue, but, you know, it's just something that we all do face. And, you know, like, how long is it going to take for us to also be accepted within our Canadian society, which is one aspect also, like, you know, or that we're treated equally. We deserve like the same respect as everybody else in academia that's here. We're all doing the same degrees. We're all here for these reasons. So why should we be segregated and considered less than, or people not want to help us more? And I really think our education institutions really need to ingrain this in the different faculties, whether it's through like ethics or even like the common practices that we may use in the real world, you know? For these experiences, as like we talk about the next generation, we are the next generation. So I think it's going to be really important that these are really interpreted and integrated in our curriculum, whether in computer science, psychology, art history, fine arts, like throughout. I think it's really something that we need to think about, because Canada is multicultural, and that's something that needs to be accepted, and we are a melting pot in that instance. So you know what, we're here, and some of our parents fought to be here to give us a better education. Like, I will even say that my parents immigrated to Canada for this very reason too, because it was assumed that Canada was less racist. But here we are today. But you know, that's what I would kind of say, that I think it's up to not just Concordia, but really all like post-secondary education institutions, even starting from kindergarten, that we all really need to incorporate this race education about how we are within society.
Absolutely. And you bring a really valid point there in terms of like people really not knowing the history of Canada and the effects that the history has had on its African Canadians, Black Canadians from many different descents and backgrounds. And I feel like that's also kind of like one of the complexities of what we can do at the post-secondary level, because people come from diverse educational backgrounds. People have had different history lessons growing up. Some people did CEGEP, some people did high school in Ontario, some people went to high school in the States, or, you know, they're international students. And so I think it's another question for us to actually think about this night, but like, how can we level the playing field of the incoming students coming in, right? So previously I had suggested having a Black 101 course targeted towards your faculty that you would have to take as a general education requirement. But kind of based off of the point that you've just brought up, it might also be important to have a Canadian history class that's mandatory for everyone to take at the beginning of their education, to understand where Black people are coming from when they're coming to their post-secondary education, just regardless of what they're studying. But these are the facts, this is the history, this is what we have, you know, in our backpack, this is the trauma that we carry with our family, and this is why these issues are important to us and why they need to be addressed. And I think one of the biggest barriers that we have is that people just don't know that these things are issues, or that these things happen. You know, for example, Nova Scotia and, you know, slaves having been brought there is a huge, like, je ne sais pas here. No, most people don't know that. And so I think a big question is, how can we get people to know this information? You know, so just food for thought, but I'm gonna pass it over to Anik.
Hi, thank you so much for all of what you both said. It's great, and so I'd say that there's two levels to what's been said. So a training that's kind of university-wide, like the consent training, is like a longer process, because there's so much more to consider when we're talking university-wide. And then looking at the different faculties, that's kind of more tailored to, you know, it's working with the different deans and making sure that that's possible with, and what kind of work needs to be done. So some of the things that you said, Sarah, were very much on point. So looking at ethics and finding ways to incorporate that into the different faculties. And these things need to happen simultaneously. And I will say they very much are happening simultaneously. So for example, this morning I had a great meeting with Annie Chérin, who's the Dean of Faculty of Fine Arts. And we will be working on anti-racist training specifically for the Faculty of Fine Arts, and looking at what does that look like for that particular faculty, ways in which to incorporate student representation, but also like community consultations with students. And, you know, does that look different in, you know, in dance than it does in studio arts, et cetera, et cetera. And then, it's not to say that we'll be doing one faculty at a time and then forgetting the other faculties. You know, this is going to be work that's been being done. Each faculty is at different points, right? So it was mentioned earlier that engineering or et cetera, when we're looking at non-humanities areas in general, is because it's not something that's necessarily at the forefront of how the studies are developed. It may take longer to get to a point where we're able to put out a training, because there's just more work to be done. But very much so, it is happening. And I want to work with you at the CSU, but also as like the student body in general, to do that work. So if you are interested in participating, please email me so I can have your contacts. And when we're doing those consultations, be sure to send out those invitations.
Amazing. Glad to hear that work is actually being done. I feel like it's very easy in terms of like these discussions to get extremely frustrated and feel like nothing is moving fast enough. So that's always very nice to hear. Victoria?
I just wanted to go back to the point that Sarah had said about like education, and the fact that, you know, we do have international students, we have students with different backgrounds and different upbringings, to say the least. And I think it's important to address for the sole reason of, yes, our annual campaign is Black Lives Matter, and it's really focusing on that, but as well as Indigenous lives that Sarah was mentioning before. And it's something that I was born and raised in Canada, and I had the luxury, I'm going to say the luxury for lack of better words, of learning enough about Indigenous history, but I didn't learn it in the terms or in the sense of the real world and what it was, because they taught us at a young age just kind of their history, and they taught us the nice history of it, and they never really taught us the brutal reality, which is something that we can't expect our students to go out and be on even playing field, to be on the same page as everyone else if they don't have this education of where and what is actually happening. So even if we do come from backgrounds that are different, the reality is that we don't really all have the correct or enough information on what has happened, what is happening, and what we can do to kind of make it better. So yeah, I was just want to re-echo that. I don't know if I really had a point to it, but yeah.
It's okay. That's a good point. Still valid. And yeah, absolutely very valid. And especially at Concordia, we have a huge international student population, and it's very important to address. And I feel like sometimes as activists who live in this realm constantly, we tend to forget that people do come from different backgrounds that don't necessarily have the same access to knowledge that we do, or even have the same amount of knowledge as we do. And we need to acknowledge that and understand that, like, that is not necessarily their fault. So that's a really important point, yeah.
I was just going to say a prime example of that is just like Kanawage is right across the bridge from LaSalle, across on the Mercier. And that's such a common native land for me. Like, I grew up, I always talked about it. We always went there, and I would talk about it at school. And some people, you know, they would have no idea what they're talking about. And it's such a simple thing that our community should be much more aware of. And when I say our community, our Concordia community needs to be more aware of in order to actually acknowledge and do things for these communities that actually make a difference. So, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Nicholas.
Hi, Kira. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Love the hair. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a mature student here at Concordia, going on, I think, my 6th year. It's been too long. It's going to be longer because I can need classes this semester. I can do the Zoom thing, blah, blah, blah. I love the fact that the CSU is taking up this initiative. I was just at a meeting of the Annual Perspectives and Practices Hub, which is another recent initiative started by Jamila. I forget her last name, but I'll be sure to send that link on over. And they were talking about decolonizing from the perspective of the curriculums, whereas the students, I'm in the geography department, and one common joke, which is untrue, is that the first 2 years that you learn, you don't really learn anything about racism or why environmental issues have become, but then you get to learn about these things, and you're like, you get to see the sort of white supremacy that permeates through all the knowledge that's given to us in a lot of these basic courses. So I'm for hiring diversity in all this, but the decolonial work and the anti-racist work has to come all faculty, all levels of people at Concordia. And that's hard work, because as many people have said, this is not part of a normal education curriculum, this kind of stuff. And as far as, I think the most hilarious thing is when a government says we have to do another commission or study on this. For Indigenous people, there's the Truth Reconciliation Report, there's the call to justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and Two Spirits. So it's all there. The work that needs to be done is the will of universities to put into curriculum, and for teachers to know that, you know, teaching us about John Muir or these other white ecologists who just see wildlife as untouched nature by humans, that's a myth, a lie. And, you know, students don't get to learn that sometimes ever. So it makes it harder for those of us who are activists on the outside to then come from this place of education and try to understand these things. It creates this huge divide, not only from non-academics to academics, but within academia too. I mean, one of the things I was most surprised about the further I got into my studies, how little there's intersectorial work in university. Loyola College and these kind of things do it. Luckily now there's not a GPA requirement for students to take courses there, but it's not a baseline. And I completely agree with the fact that there should be within each faculty a basic course that says this is the stuff we've been teaching for over 50 years and this is why it's wrong. And you know, say that's political, but all bodies are political. So I think being apolitical is worse than, you know, admitting that there's an issue. So yeah, and I'm gonna allow myself to have a little dig here and I'll stop. But I just learned that Concordia is gonna have a real estate faculty. And one of the demands for Black Lives Matter is to consider Black people on the island of Montreal, Tiohtià:ke. So having a school in real estate, I don't know what the courses are gonna be like. Perhaps it'll be more progressive. There's a housing crisis and gentrification. And usually the first to go are people who are marginalized, racialized, and not part of the normative standard. So having this sort of new faculty at Concordia gives me a lot of pause into the willingness to change in the proper direction. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
That's a very good point, Nicholas. Thank you for that. I'm going to allow the next 4 people to speak, but I just want to make sure that we're able to go over a few other things in terms of BLM demands for Concordia. I mean, obviously education is the biggest chunk of it, but I do want to talk about how we're addressing other things that take part in education, and how we protect Black lives on campus, and how we listen to Black voices and students. But I'm just going to give the floor over to Amaria.
Hi. I just wanted to speak on a point I believe someone mentioned earlier. So one of the things that I've noticed as a student, I'm in theology, that's my major, and one of the things I've noticed is that the curriculum maybe needs some revision to include certain Black people that were in history or that contributed. For example, there are a lot of white theologians that we're learning in class, but there are also a lot of Black theologians. Are we going to go through them? Probably not. So that's a major thing, because it's like, why are we forgetting those important people that did play an important fact and an important role in history, just in a different place at a different time, probably. But it is important because to me, it seems like it's very whitewashed. And which brings me to my next point. I think for me in history class, and I've speak to many other Black students, history has been very whitewashed. And so when we do go over Black history, it's like maybe a class, maybe half a class, that's it. And we're back to what I call the white history. So there needs to be, and this is something I say in my head, or I say to friends, but actually there needs to be like a revision of history in schools, not just at Concordia, but just in general, because we need to include these different factors. I heard someone mention Indigenous history, and also, like I said, Black history. There needs to be a revision so that we could include these things that have been missing and that need to be taught in schools. Yes, we learn Black history, but we learn Martin Luther King Jr. and that's it. We don't know these really important role models for not only Black people, but like people in general. These are really important people that play a big role in history in general. Inventors, so many inventors that are Black that we just don't talk about. We only talk about the white inventors. And so this is important, because for me and anybody else, we see, oh, okay, there could be Black people that make things and that invent things and that contribute in history in general. But because we're not taught that, because we just need to Google it instead of, sitting in class and actually learning it, we don't know these things. And so this goes back to stereotypes. Because in history, there were very intellectual Black people that did things and that made changes in society, but because we cover it up and we don't talk about it, or it's not taught in schools, we don't know these things. And so it goes back to, okay, now you're in university and it's like, okay, wow, you're in university, or wow, you have a Black professor, but it's like this shouldn't be, because there were a lot of like I said, intellectual Black people who went to school, people who, it's not just, okay, you're on the streets, or you're in the ghettos, or you're it's just not just that. There are many other representatives that were Black, that are intellectuals, that were professors, that invented things, and so forth. So that was basically my point with that. And yeah.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for that. Very, very important point. And actually, I think it ties in kind of to like what Nicholas was saying earlier about the university developing a real estate department. Is that what you said correctly? Yeah. And I think kind of that begs us to ask the question of, in order to fight racism on campus and really have an institution work from an anti-racist perspective, we have to go above and beyond racism, right? And think about concepts of property and profit and colonizing space and, you know, decolonizing all of those concepts and taking all those concepts down and understanding things from different perspectives. That is also a huge part of what it means to be anti-racist and to really fight for Black lives and hearing Black voices and understanding Black students. It's more than just, you know, not being racist and acknowledging that like Black students should have more representative profs and faculty members on site, but that there are other ideologies that help in dismantling, you know, white supremacy and advocating for anti-racism practices on campus. So I just want to let Jason speak. I think you had something to say.
Yeah, actually, I need to go. So I just wanted to say hello and introduce myself to everybody. So I'm Jason Lewis. I'm a prof over in design and computation arts and the Faculty of Fine Arts. And I'm the special advisor to the provost on Indigenous spaces, and also a founding member of the Indigenous Directions Leadership Committee. So it's really heartening for me to see this group come together and to hear the concerns that you all have. And I think I can speak for my colleagues on the Indigenous Directions Leadership Group that, you know, we're interested in, you know, how we can work in solidarity with you from that perspective. And that I want to encourage you all. These fights are long and hard, even when they're not fights, even if we have agreeable people that we're working with and collaborating with. I just want to say, take care of yourselves and take care of your mental health. And you're not going to solve everything tomorrow. We would like to. I would love to have that magic wand. But what I've seen over 20, 30 years of this now is it's really, really important that you take care of yourself, because it doesn't do us any good if you burn yourself out and we lose you for the challenges ahead. So with that, I'll say aloha and have a good rest of the evening, and I hope to see you all around. Good night.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for those words. Very important. Burnout is real when it comes to activism work. Yeah, so I just kind of want to circle back. I've taken some notes about what people have said and what has come up more often. And so far, based off of like our discussion on education, the solutions that I keep hearing that people really think it would work would be, let's say, one-on-one classes in each department regarding Blackness from that perspective, and just an overall general one-on-one class on Canadian history, but really, what's the word? Not monitored. I don't know, like a rated R version of Canadian history that like actually talks about the genocide that has happened, the 60s coup, you know, that like the last like segregated school only closed in the 1980s, things like that. And readdressing curriculum was a big one. We also had reassessing how we create hiring committees and the question of why there aren't many more Black faculty members on these hiring committees, because we do have Black faculty members. And thank you for the correction, Nicholas. I was like, wait a minute, the 80s, that seems too early. 1996 was when the last segregated school closed, so even closer to us. And then also just faculty members, how we're increasing that. And so I just wanted to give this a last chance to talk about this perspective in terms of like addressing education and solutions of how to make our education more diverse and more inclusive towards Black students on campus. If anybody else has anything else to say, Nicholas, your hand is still up. So I don't know if it's from your previous turn or if you have something else to say. No? Amazing. Okay. So then the next point I wanted to talk about was police violence. And so obviously it's not necessarily something that is inherently happening on campus, because we are very fortunate enough where we're not like the United States and we don't have campus police going around and perpetrating a bunch of violence on Black bodies. But at the end of the day, an academic institution still has a stance to take on political conversations, and police violence is a huge one, and I'm pretty sure it's probably the biggest reason for why the CSU chose BLM amidst everything that was going on in May and June. So I just wanted to open the floor to discuss about how we feel in terms of like universities taking a stance on police violence and how we can address police violence from an educational perspective and from a post-secondary institution. What is the work to be done from our university, and how can students participate in the fight against police violence? Isaiah, you want to start?
Okay. Sorry, I was typing. What's it called? Well, quite frankly, similar to, I guess, speaking in terms of like what I said before about the CEO's example of there's no Black talent, like there's limited Black talent, so that's why it's like justifying the reason, where it's like, I think it was Martin Luther King who said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So in that sense, where it's like, it's up to the educational institutions such as the universities who are teaching the future generations and kind of like grooming us so that we can contribute to society in a positive manner, to call out society when it's not going well, because the police are here supposed to serve and to protect. And so it's like, if they're not, who are they really serving and protecting if they're going out? Like even now, it's like we have students where I know that we're talking very lightly about being in code red, but now it's like, I have to worry about COVID and I have to worry about the simple day to day. Like if I'm on the street, there are these fines that police officers now, I think it's $1,000 if you're walking without a mask. If like you're not supposed to be at anybody else's house. So if they suspect, keyword, like it's a lot of this is their discretion. So if they suspect that you're having a gathering and you don't open your door, they can go and get warrants. They can go and get, they have a lot of power in the system. So it's up to, when we see cases and the multiple cases of these, the abuse of power, it's for the big institutions that have the influence, that have the voice, and who have their ear, whether it be through political or professional means, to kind of correct it. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse and worse. And our students, like young Black youth, our students, and even like our faculty, what little Black faculty members we have, are at risk. And so it's like, what's the point of trying to find ways of letting them in if we can't try to at least protect them in every walk of life or every aspect? Yeah, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. That's a very valid question. Amaria?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, there is a big stereotype, like we've been discussing pretty much this whole Zoom call, around how non-white people are viewed. For Black people, we're viewed as thugs, we're viewed as ghetto, and Indigenous people, they're viewed as less than, or it's the same. It's around the same view, just that minority feeling. And so in the police system, whether they want to admit it or not, it is how they view us. And so that is why there are so many things going around. I had a friend, an incident happened to her and her boyfriend where they got stopped, and it just it was blown out of proportion for no reason at all, because they were Black, honestly. And it was just the automatic rage that the police had, the automatic force that the police had for no reason. So there has to be some type of education towards the police, because why is that the case? You meet a Black person and you're already mad, you're already getting forceful, you know? Why is that the case? And so there needs to be a serious conversation, honestly, to what is the training that they're going through? What is it like? Because it's something that's been going on in the States, it happens here. So what is the training? And also for students, they need to understand that we are afraid of the police. A lot of us are afraid of the police. I'm a girl and I look sweet, but I'm afraid of the police, because that is what being Black is about. That's what being a minority is about. You just walk and you just feel like, okay, at any moment anything could happen. So people need to understand that that is a fear. It's not just, we're saying that to say that, it's actual fear because of our skin tone. And another thing I wanted to say was there needs to be an education too. Maybe this is more for minorities, Black people especially, but an education on how to react when you are stopped by the police. I know people say this a lot, but it is very important, because situations escalate when you don't know how to react. And I'm not saying that's every reason why things happen, but it is also a big issue, because we tend to also just react in a certain way that makes the police officer even more aggressive. And so like I said, things could still happen nevertheless, but I've seen a lot of videos and it's just like, maybe if you calm down a little bit and not reply every time or something, maybe that would help in the situation. Not discarding the fact that these things do happen nevertheless, but there needs to be education on all of the sides. So yeah, that's what I want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we even have to say that we need to educate Black people and non-white people on how to respond to police, when inherently it's not even their fault. But you're absolutely right, and it's, at the end of the day, it's for the safety of our bodies that needs to happen. And I think you have a very good point there. And going back to like training towards police officers, and what are they learning? Why are they so angry when they're approached by a Black body, or when they see a non-white person? How come that is their reaction? And obviously, I think that goes back to the concept of inherent racism that's ingrained in us as we're socialized growing up. And that's a whole nother thing that has to be addressed. But the reason that we're talking about this here is because, whether certain people believe it or not, post-secondary institutions of education have an immense power on society, right? Education is very well seen, and when you're educated, that means that you have some sort of authority. And I do thoroughly believe that we have a part to play in terms of what it may be, police reform, defunding police, and addressing police brutality, for sure. But I don't want to go on my rant, so I'm gonna let Anik talk.
Thank you. You all bring such relevant points. So I can't necessarily speak to what is to be done at the university in terms of the police specifically, because I really do think that there's so many different types of knowledges at the university. So, you know, there are different faculty members, different departments, et cetera. I think they'll all show their activism in their own way. And I'm excited to see what happens in the coming year in terms of looking at what defunding the police looks like, looking at what research looks like around this, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say that in terms of Concordia specific, there is, though you were mentioning, Akira, that we don't have an issue in terms of like campus police in the same way. We do have campus security, and we want to make sure that our campus security is its best job possible, that it's keeping our entire community safe, and that they're well trained and have the right resources to be able to do so, for sure. And so that's, again, another area that I would really suggest participating in the Black Concordia Caucus, because that's the work that we'll be doing this year, is looking at what trainings are happening in other, best practices that are happening in other universities, other institutions, organizations, in terms of making sure that campus security is working at its best, and of course, not necessarily making it reliant on external security forces. And that's not just the SBVM. Obviously, that's a major one that we want to make sure that the SBVM has to come to campus as little as possible, because it is such a trigger for so many of our students and our community in general. But there are also other forms of external security that the university has to sometimes use. And so how do we make sure that we're not relying on that, and also make sure that if there is a need to bring these external systems in, what's the protocol around that, et cetera, et cetera. So, so yeah, and you all are so wise and have so much input. So I would really love to hear your voices.
Yeah, you're definitely right. We, in terms of like campus security, and unfortunately, depending on the situation, we do have to involve external security. And so that is definitely a big discussion to have, and like what that looks like. And I think this is a good point to kind of plant the seed of thought of bringing in Indigenous practices, right? Because when we're also talking about anti-racism work, we're also talking about decolonizing our institution, and that a huge part of that is indigeneity and Indigenous practices that have been used for so long within their communities that possibly could be useful here in implementation in terms of justice and taking care of the community from a different perspective than what we're used to, in terms of bringing in police officers and having them carry out the law and making sure that the law is maintained. So maybe there's a way here for collaboration with our Indigenous communities that could help us develop practices that are less hurtful, that are less traumatizing for others. But also at the same time, make sure that we feel safe on campus. But in the meantime, Sarah, do you want to take the mic?
Oui, merci. So I guess like in that like aspect too, especially the one thing that also needs to be acknowledged is that we are also right near a police station too on campus, at the downtown campus at least. And to also be mindful of that and the student experiences that really do occur, even with racial profiling, and even just simply wanting to go home in the middle of the night, to go to the library, and like having that fear, because like even from personal experience, like even if I am at the library at 11 p.m., my mom's like, when are you coming home? Where are you? What are like, these like detailed things, just in the sense of my own safety. And those are the things that even like some of our own parents think about while we're going to school, or even think about the out of province students or the people who come from different countries, how their parents are feeling, especially if they're Black or they're Indigenous, and that sense of like, they want to give us our freedom at the same time, but also this is the cards we're dealt with our society. And even to think, like, I live in the South Shore, there's this phrase called driving while Black, which is like a real thing. And I've gotten racially profiled and stopped recently, like this summer, while I was driving, and I called Victoria because I was panicking over the phone about what was going on, because that was honestly the first time I got stopped, and especially in the South Shore, you don't know what to expect, and I basically got a bullshit ticket, but it is what it is. But it's just those instances, like the fear our parents have, and to think about the fear that we may also have in our own future with our own children, of what we're going to deal with. And then also taking a look at like, our own campus security in that sense too. Are they trained? Are they qualified to be doing these things? There have been instances where they have profiled students female Black students as well. So what training do they get for their diversity training? Because it also starts at our own campus as well when it comes to our own security too. And for us to feel safe at Concordia and to be able to rely on these people if also anything does happen to us, although we're not on campus right now, what about the future? So how are we going to give them with their own diversity techniques in order to help us, whether women, Black, Indigenous, you know, all the way through around? How are they going to protect us? Especially, I don't feel comfortable with the police. I never have. I've had my own bad experiences. I never will. I just don't like them. But like, you know, it's just, these people are meant to protect us. And the thing is that Concordia needs to acknowledge that this is a fear that we do have, even when we see them just walking around on our own campus. The district is right next to us, like literally across the street. So it's kind of like those triggering aspects, and the university needs to, you know, be able, I don't know if they give resources or funding to police. I'm not too sure how Concordia does with that, but also advertising like the reallocation of different resources to go to different initiatives by defunding the police. And that's really important also. And, you know, these different aspects that, you know, are not considered or thought about are really crucial. And I think that's really the next step.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's, and sorry, I'm just like writing down something you just said.
No worries, go ahead.
But you're absolutely valid in what you're saying, and like especially the fact that although that we might not have police officers on campus, police violence and police brutality is very, 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 very vivid in our life, and that affects how we interact with, you know, professors on campus. It just affects our lives in general. So therefore the institution should have a stake in this and should have something to say about it and should take action on it 100%. I'm going to finish my notes on what you just said, but I'll let you speak, Isaiah.
What's it called? No, Sarah hit the nail on the head with the shared experience, so I'm not going to repeat what was said, but it was just, yeah, no, making sure that we take care of the things internally. And so once everything's taken care of, we can look towards the world and show them that we're that leading example and they should be like us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I don't know this either, if the university funds at all the SPVM to a certain extent, and what our really working relationship is with them as a post-secondary institution, and the overlap between our security on campus. But definitely relocating. We don't fund the SPVM. Perfect. Amazing. Good to hear. Thank you, Andrew. Nicholas also shared the Facebook page for the decolonial perspectives and practice hubs. So I do encourage everyone to take a look over there after. And also, if it's possible for you, Nick, to put this on the page of this event, for anyone who leaves early or who wasn't able to attend but is looking for resources, that could be very useful.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if anyone, because it was higher in the comments, there is a scholarship, there's 4 scholarships actually available at the BPI for Black students that are currently enrolled at Concordia. I left the link, please apply. The deadline is October 9th, and they are each of $2,500.
Amazing. Oh, amazing. Perfect. See, these things like this, we don't know. So your hand is still up, so I don't know if you want to say something again.
It is supposed to be down. I'll put it down in a second.
No worries. Okay. Yeah. I didn't have much more to say about police violence. I don't know how we feel in terms of like Concordia making a statement on what their opinion is in terms of police violence, and how it's affected Concordia students, because we have to admit that there are a huge amount of Black students or BIPOC students who have been affected by police brutality or have interacted with the police in a certain way that has left them with trauma, that do attend Concordia. So they do have a stake in this discussion, and I'm not sure where we want them to have, well, we want them to say anything in regards to police violence. So I just want to close this conversation off, but I'm just wondering if anybody else has anything to say in regards to Concordia's part to play in this discussion of police violence and how it affects students. Right, okay, so Carter has just shared that they had a personal interaction with the police where they were harassed by them right by EV, and is asking, how is Concordia protecting its students of color from the police when attending school? So although we might not have police officers on campus, like Saha said earlier, the SPVM is 1 block away. And has any measures been put into place regarding that? Is there any type of relationship between the SPVM and the university that they have in terms of talking about the campus grounds and their control, their rights on like what they can do to students on campus grounds? Does anybody have anything to say with that? I see Nicholas, you have your hand up.
I think Anik was waving up too.
Oh,
you want to go first?
Oh, I just wanted to say that unfortunately, Lisa White had to leave earlier, but Lisa White would be in a best position to answer that question as the Office of Rights and Responsibilities. And I know that there has been a similar effort as, you know, in the same way that SARC, no matter where the incident happens, you can still go and see SARC for services. I think that the Office of Rights and Responsibility is working on that as well, particularly when it's things that happen around campus grounds. So yeah, I guess that I would direct you all to Lisa White around that question.
Amazing, thank you, Anik.
Yeah, I was gonna speak to a slightly indirect version of influence, which is I heard during an event for AVEC many years ago when it was still existing, that some students, their family were at risk of being deported, and obviously this became an issue for them as students. And they were finding that support at Concordia, whether for like, you know, mental support, moral support, and all these things was absolutely lacking. So as far as, you know, one and the other, I know there's a nebulous place here where it's like the school doesn't want to be liable for giving any sort of advice to people, but at the same time, we see school as sort of our home away from home. So obviously we're home for a computer, so it doesn't work, but if you want to feel safe in a place of education, there had to have people that know how to support you in these things. And, you know, the risk of being racialized, the risk of being discriminated, the risk of being deported are all things that students can face. So as an international university, Concordia should be investing and training and many other things in this perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like this is a muddy area because, you know, we don't have a direct relationship with SPVM, and I guess if something happens off campus, it's easy to see that we don't really have, you know, any what's the word in English? Sorry, I'm blanking here. We don't have oh God, I speak so many languages and I can't even think of any one of them.
Jurisdiction?
No, not jurisdiction, but like we don't have any responsibility. There you go. This is not a responsibility. It's not working on campus. We don't have a working relationship with them. We don't really have that much hearsay. But I think for us students, as long as we're a student, you have some responsibility to take care of the student, especially if it's on the near around campus. And I think it's just very hard to see how the university can take a stance, how the university can help protect its students. And like you said, Nicholas, we have a huge international population. So to a certain extent, the university does have some responsibility to make sure that the students are safe and are ensuring that those students do feel safe. But I think that's like a huge discussion, and a lot more needs to be clarified in order to find solutions for that. So I don't really have any much more to say on that perspective, but I see, Anik, you have your hand up, so maybe you have something to shed light on.
Well, I would just say that often what happens, because the university is so big, it's often directing the question or the demand to the right area. So international services would probably be the best to be able to even have, sometimes it's even as simple as having a bank of resources that if we're not able to, as Concordia, to give A to Z advice, then what services off campus offer that. And that's something that I know that across the board, all services at Concordia are really making sure to build relationships with external services, because there is a bit of a, you know, and as Andrew said, there is a bit of a end to our jurisdiction and what we can actually offer and what we can do as a university. And part of that, our responsibility to our students is to maintain those relationships with people who are able to do those things. So I don't know international services enough to be able to answer that question, whether they actually have the information of who to contact and what to do in that particular type of situation. But I do know that they would definitely be the ones to speak to about that.
Okay, thank you. International services, I'll write that down. Great, okay. So it's turning the direction a little bit, but I'm just trying to go back to more something that is easier for us to find solutions for, something that we have a bit more control of. It was mentioned way earlier in the discussion, Manuela had talked about safe spaces and mental health for Black students and how that's a really big part in Black healing and reducing trauma for Black students on campus. And last year, and also during my time when I was working with the CSU, I was hearing a lot of stories in regards to our mental health professionals on campus, the lack of representation there, and not even just the lack of representation, but the lack of diversity training for the mental health professionals that were on campus. I've heard a scary amount of horrifying stories of how Black and non-white students were treated when they went to get help at these mental health services. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, because that is something that I feel like we have a little bit more control of than the other topics. Unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that as a person of color, we will get aggressed in many different ways when it comes to society and on campus, but there are ways that we can deal with these things that trigger us and these traumas that we go through that can empower us more and that the university can help with. And I think one of the biggest ways to do that is ensuring that our mental health is taken care of and that we have safe spaces on campus. So I just wanted to open up the floor to discuss that and discuss concerns and solutions that we may have towards that. Go ahead, Anik.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's definitely the #1 priority for the Black Perspectives Office this year. We did do a Black Mental Wellness Week last year, but it was, it was in February. It was really the beginning of our kind of mandate. And I'm really excited to now have the funds and also just the network to expand that. So a few things that are happening. There is a project that was, I don't know if any of you know of the BIPOC mental health list that exists. So right now that got funded by Shift to expand their website, to make it bilingual, to make it more accessible in general. So we're working with the Lavender Collective, who are the ones organizing that. And we're creating a Black mental wellness on campus website that's going to be kind of based for Concordia, in the sense that most of the information will be for Concordia students, but it is also, because we got so much funds in fundraising, we're going to expand that and try to see if we can build relationships with other universities across Canada. So that's in terms of having a website that is bilingual, has the resources that are available, the protocols of like, what do you do when you have a racial incident in a classroom? How do you file a complaint? All of those types of questions that I get on a daily basis, essentially. And then we're also rolling out a series of workshops and events, et cetera, for the whole year. So the first one that's coming up, I will send it to the CSU because I'd love to have your support in promoting it, is a peer support workshop that's going to be happening in terms of how to support friends who are going through some sort of mental health situation. We have a bunch of speakers that are be coming in, and I really want to focus on highlighting the local Black mental health practitioners in general, whether that be meditation or like psychological psychologists, et cetera, the wide range of what mental health can look like. And okay, so I said those 2 points. I'm also working with psychological services in terms of training their staff and looking at what they need to do in terms of diversifying their staff. And so that's going to be happening soon. And I believe those were my main 3 points. If I remember anything else, I'll let you know.
Amazing. That's a great start, especially the training for the mental health professionals. It's definitely needed. And the expansion of the website, that's very exciting, because that was one of the first things I discovered when I was working with the BIPOC committee, was the BIPOC professional list. And it's crazy, like there's a huge amount of names on it, but it's really hard to find, and most Black students or non-white students don't even know that this list exists. So thank you for bringing that up again. Amaria, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a big fact. In the Black community, I feel like there's a big taboo around mental health. They don't want to talk about it. I mean, just in households in general, we've been taught that like mental health it's not a thing, like it's not a thing in Black households. But there are so many things, especially Black youth, they go through and they need to unpack. And I feel like, especially as Black students and Black youth in general, we're always on activism mode for our whole lives. We're always defending or dealing with these microaggressions and dealing with racism, really. And so it's just like there's a lot to unpack, but at the same time, if you don't know that those things are out there, you're not going to go to them. And even if you know, sometimes it's just like, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to go, it's not a thing. So one thing I just wanted to highlight is we need to make it a thing. We need to make it okay to go out and search for these resources or go to these resources once we know that they're available to us. That's not taboo anymore. It's okay to go and have a conversation or go sit down with someone, a specialist, or have a safe space where you could just unpack your feelings and unpack what you've been dealing with. So that taboo around the Black community needs to go away. It's time enough, because a lot of Black people are suffering because of it. So that's the point I just wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. We don't cry. Emotions are things that we are kept inside, and I think that ties in with like a lot of the stereotypes that the Black community has to deal with, especially like the strong Black woman. Like sensitivity is something that seems to be hard to come by or sometimes frowned upon in our community, and that's something that definitely needs to be addressed. So I think that in terms of not only encouraging that we use these resources and like expanding these resources and diversifying them so that we feel comfortable enough to go to resources is necessary, but also making sure that when we are approaching students and we are trying to reach out to students, that these services are available, to really harp on the fact that it's important to take care of oneself, and that like it's okay to do this, and you are no less of a person if you do go see a psychologist. But I think that's also something that will come just with the wave of having more BIPOC therapists on campus and having more trained mental health professionals who are sensitive to these issues, because then that will create more comfort within the community. And once they see that, oh, you know what, it's actually not bad, I did not have a horrifying time talking about what's going on in my life to this white professional, I'm going to go back, oh, I did find a Black therapist. Those word to mouth will spread, and that will also encourage the community to go seek out these methods of like care. But absolutely, you're very right about that.
And, oh, sorry, just one last thing to add. It's also important to, if we are telling them these things are available, that financing, maybe it's not going to be an issue, because that's another thing I hear a lot, like, how am I going to pay for that? So there are these free things that we could do or these free resources out there that Black people could use that does not require financing, because we know that is also something that people are a little bit more hesitant when it comes to those things. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick, you have something to add, say?
Well, you both just reminded me of other things I wanted to say. So first off, definitely, thank you. I really appreciate what you said, Maria, in terms of like issues that we need to deal with in terms of the community and how to do that destigmatizing work. So there will be workshops on destigmatizing and making sure that people feel that they can access these services, no matter what their background is, and so part of it is destigmatizing, but also part of it is finding versions of mental health support that also are, like, some people feel more comfortable being in a space that's a group therapy or meditation practices or et cetera, and not being like, well, you have to do it this way or else you're not actually working on your mental health. So those are two aspects. I'm also, so part of working with psychological services, we're working with Zendens, which I hope that you all know about Zendens, but so there will be workshops there, and then there will be also sensitivity training for the larger student body, to make sure that we're, defining things like microaggressions and relationships, between peers, what happens when you don't speak up for your classmates, et cetera, et cetera. So that is going to be happening. And then there was a question about resources or something. I can't remember what was said. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Resource finances, like resources in terms of financial aid.
So I hope that everyone knows that you do have, I believe, it's been a little minute since I was a student, but I believe it's 6 sessions that you can see with a psychologist that is covered already. So that's really important for all students to know that. I know that there is long waits, and it's not necessarily the fastest process, but because we do have such a large student body, but that's really important to know. And then there are, again, many other free resources that like you spoke about, and that anything that is coming out of the BPO is 100% free for you all. So that was a big part of why we needed to fundraise, is that I need to find a way to pay these people without having to ask you guys to put money in. So 100% of what we'll be offering will be free for students, for sure.
Amazing. I just would like to say that Andrew says it might be 8 to 10, which is great. Thank you for that correction. Amari, do you have something else to add? Okay, perfect.
I forgot to learn my answer.
Yeah, I'm reading your lips. I'm learning now. I heard that all without the voice on. Yeah, so I just we have 10 minutes left, so I kind of want to tie it all together and wrap it up and allow for us to have last thoughts. But kind of this discussion on mental health has kind of brought me back to thinking about one of the most important ways to fight for Black lives, or, like to really support BLM movement on campus, is to show Black students that you want to keep them there, and that you want them to succeed, and that you want them to graduate. And as I said at the beginning, when Isaiah was talking about how, the feeling is like, yes, you can be here, but you can't really stay here, is a big thing for Black students. And I was saying that, although that there's quite a huge percentage of Black students who enter university, that doesn't necessarily mean that they actually graduate. And it's just a big thing, because there's just so many barriers in place. And so I just wanted to talk about what methods could be put in place, or what could the university work on to show incoming Black students that they know that there are barriers in place, that there are systematic barriers in place, and that they're working to change them. But in the meantime, we can support you so that we can ensure that you succeed on this educational path, that you graduate from this path. Kind of like an orientation care package of like, here, you're starting at Concordia, but your experience within this educational institution, we know is different in comparison to a white experience in this education institution. So here are the resources that we have in place, that we've put in place to make sure that you succeed, to make you aware that, you know, we care about your success, and like we care about your mental health, and we care about all these things that are external to us but impact you and impact how you get educated here. So I just wanted to discuss that a little bit as we close this conversation. Amaria?
I'm gonna be quick, hopefully. One thing is really putting to action all of the words that we're talking about. One thing that I want to highlight is that it's great that it's a theme, but we need to not just make it a theme after the theme is done. Like, it needs to be something that continues even in 2020, 2021, 2022, etc. Like, it needs to continue, because obviously this is more than a theme. It is the reality of a lot of Black students, and that it's actually kind of sad that it's a theme, because, you know, it's our lives. But, you know, we need to, by showing that this is more than a theme, we're showing students that we really care about making these things happen. And it's also showing future students that this is a school that you could come in and really further your education, really go deeper and graduate and actually be successful and be who you want to be as a Black person. And so I think of HBCUs too, and PWIs. So there are a lot of people, and this is in America, but HBCUs, they attract a lot of Black students because of that environment, that welcoming environment from the faculty, from the students, and activities in the school. So when I think of that versus PWIs, which is predominantly white institutions, that is a little less likely, because they don't have that sense of belonging. A lot of Black students from America always tell me, like, oh, I wish I went to HBCU because of that belonging feeling. So we want our students to feel like they belong in the school, and you want future students to feel like, okay, if I go to this school, I'm going to feel like I belong, and I'm going to feel like I'm going to actually have a good university experience. And so that is important. You don't want them to look at Concordia and see, oh, Concordia is a white school. It's just a school, it's just a university. You could have a good experience, whether you're Black, white, etc. So you still want them to feel that, that welcome, that belonging. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A very valid point. Like, at the end of the day, we're coming here to study. So no matter what we look like, how we appear, we should be able to have the exact same experience as anybody else that comes by. And, you know, there are many methods to ensure that everyone who comes into an institution feels welcome and cared for there. And we just have to make sure that we implement these methods. And so I just know if there's anybody else that has anything to say on that. All right, well, I think then we're gonna close it off here. There's a lot that has been said here, a lot that has been repeated and underlined and bolded. So I think we have a lot of notes to go off of in order to move forward with this campaign and ensure that we hear students and we provide things for students that are needed and that they asked for. And so I'm just going to allow the CSU campaign or members of the CSU, if they have any last words to say to the audience before we say good night.
Yeah, I just have one thing to add really quickly. Thanks to everyone for coming. This was a really great discussion. I just wanted to let everybody know that our plan is for this to not be the only one of these discussions. So we're hoping to do it like maybe, I don't know, like once a month, once every couple months throughout the rest of the year. And like Amaria said, like, this is not just something that we're going to be talking about this year. Like, this is an ongoing thing, right? So it's important for us to keep the discussion going. And so we will definitely keep everyone in the loop about like the town hall process like as it goes forward, because we want to hear from as many students as possible.
Yeah, and just to kind of finish off on that, I just want to say thank you again, like, for everybody coming here, because again, like, this is important. This is a conversation. A conversation takes 1, 2, 3, a group of people, you know, and it takes a lot to come out and talk, and especially in like an environment like this. So like a huge thank you to that, and I really hope that you guys come to the next ones. And like Nicole said, this is not a 1-year thing. This is not a 2-year plan. This is like, the university needs, until this is like a basic integration into the university, this is like a 10-year, 15-year. Hopefully it doesn't take that long kind of plan. So don't think it's a theme for the year. It's more than that. So thank you again.
Yeah, and I just want to, last note is, like, whatever you have to say is always going to be valid. And I feel like from my own experience, when I first started university, I didn't think that I would have that much of an impact on what my university did. But all your voices actually can have a lot of impact. You just have to go and talk to the right people. Andrew Woodall, who's here and is part of the Dean of Students, is an amazing person that you can go talk to about your concerns, and that can lead you to the right way. And same with the CSU. Even if you're not a part of the CSU, you can email them and talk to them about this. And so just like Victoria and Nicole said, this isn't the last one of the conversations. If you have more thoughts, more solutions, more ideas that come up in the futures, like, keep them, or even email them, talk to them about it. It's really important to hear your voices. And yeah, really thank everyone for coming. Thank you for participating. Once again, Anik, who's here, thank you for coming with the Black Perspectives Initiatives and telling us about everything that you're doing. Hopefully that's going to encourage more people to talk to them and get involved with them, because they clearly need the help and they clearly want it and encourage it. But on that, have a good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you to CSU for putting this on. And yeah, have a great night.
Thanks a million. This is great. Really great.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
So much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.